A dark sky and great ragged masses of clouds hung low over the surrounding hills. The air grew heavy, relieved occasionally by a deep gust of wind that died away to be succeeded by an ominous calm. Low muttering thunder jarred painfully on the ears. The Indians, seeing the approaching storm, prepared for it by collecting and fastening their horses, and covering their firearms and ammunition, and lying flat on the earth themselves. On came the storm with startling velocity, and the dread artillery of heaven boomed overhead, followed closely by blinding flashes of light, and the velocity of the whirlwind seemed to arise in its might, to add desolation to the terrible scene. When the vivid gleams lit up the air, enormous trees could be seen bending under the fierceness of the blast, and great white sheets of water burst out of the clouds, as if intent on deluging the world. Every element in nature united in terrific warfare. The thunder roared and the wind ravaged ungovernable wild. The rain had already swelled a little creek into a mighty stream that rolled its dark, angry waters with fury, and added its sullen roar to the howlings of the storm. It took 3 long, never to be forgotten hours for the storm to fade. The flashing lightning and the roaring thunders gradually became less and less distinct to the eye and ear, and the devastating storm was speeding on towards the east. And when at dawn of day the waters were assuaged, the thunder died away, and the lightnings were chained in their cell, the scene was one of indescribable desolation. The wind had gone home, daylight had cowed him from a raging giant into a meek prisoner, and led him moaning to his cavern in the eastern hills. A strangely solemn calm seemed to take the place of the wild conflict, but the track of destruction was there, and the swollen water and felled trees, the scattered boughs and uprooted saplings, told the story of the havoc of the storm. It was a night of horror to pass through, but it was nothing compared to the fear that the captives had when they were approaching the Indian village, and where the fate of the captives would possibly be decided by bloodshed or the fearful stake. On the 21st of July, they left camp early and continued their journey. The day being cool and favorable for traveling, their route lay over rolling prairie, interspersed with extensive area of marsh, which however they easily avoided crossing. Jumping Bear, a young Indian who had shown Venny so many marks of goodwill, again made his appearance with a sad expression on his face, and that day would ride in silence by Venny's side, which was an act of great condescension on his part, for the Indian men rarely thus equalize themselves with women, but ride in advance. They had now traveled nearly 300 miles, and despite Venny's fears, she began to rejoice in the prospect of arriving among women. Even though they were Indians, she had a dawning hope that she might find companionship with beings of her own gender, however separated their lives and customs might be. While on her journey, Venny thought of all the characters of romance and history, wherein the nature of the red man is enshrined in poetic beauty, the unchartered nobility of soul, the brave generosity, the simple dignity untrammeled by the hollow conventionalities of civilized life, all rose mockingly before her, and the heroes of her youthful imagination passed through her mind in strange contrast with the flesh and blood realities into whose hands she had fallen. The stately Logan, the fearless Philip, the bold Black Hawk, the gentle Pocahontas, truly those pictures of the children of the forest that adorn the pages of the novelist, are delightful conceptions of the airy fancy, fitted to charm the mind. They amuse and beguile the hours they invest with their interests, but the true red man, as Venny saw him, does not exist between the pages of many volumes. They were now nearing a river which from its locality must have been the Tongue River, where they found a refreshing drink and rested for a short time. Here the Indians paused to dress and decorated themselves with clothing taken from the raided wagons, to make a good appearance and imposing entrance into the village where their families and friends awaited them. The Indians gave Veni to understand that when they crossed this stream and a short distance beyond, they would be at their home. When all was arranged, the chief mounted his horse and rode on in triumph toward the village. Highly elated over the position of his white captive, the entire Indian village poured forth to meet them in the most enthusiastic manner. There were flourishing flags and weapons of war in frenzied joy. As they entered, the village, which stretched for miles along the banks of the stream, resembled a vast military encampment. They penetrated through the irregular settlement for over a mile, accompanied by the enthusiastic escort of men, women, and children. They rode in the center of a double column of Indians and directly in the rear of the chief, till they reached the door of his lodge, when several of his wives came out to meet him. He had 6, but the senior one remained in the tent, while a younger one was absent with the farmer or Grosvenor Indians. Their salutation is very much in the manner of the Mexicans. The women crossed their arms on the chief's breasts and smiled. When they met Veni, it was in silence but with looks of great astonishment. Veni got down off the horse as directed and followed the chief into a great tent, distinguished from the others by its superior ornaments. It was decorated with colored porcupine quills and a terrible fringe of human scalp locks, taken in battle from the ponies. The women of the chief's family seemed kindly disposed towards Veni, and one of them brought her a dish of meat. Many others followed her example, even from the neighboring lodges. They showed great evidences of compassion and tried to express their sympathy in signs, because she had been torn from her own people and compelled to come such a long fatiguing journey. At nightfall, an elder woman came to Veni. She built a fire and caused water to boil, and drew a tea of which she gave her a portion, assuring Veni that it would cure the tired and weary feeling, and secure her a good rest. This was proven to be true, for soon a deep drowsiness began to steal over Veni, and she slept sweetly. This was the first true sleep she had enjoyed in many nights. The next morning, the whole village was in motion. The warriors were going to battle against the white enemy, and old men, women, and children were sent out in another direction to a place of safety, as designated by the chief. Everything was soon moving. With the rapidity of custom, the tent poles were lowered and the tents rolled up. The cooking utensils were put together and laid on cross beams connecting the lower ends of the poles as they trail the ground from the horses' sides, to which they are attached. The train of the Indians was immensely large, nearly the whole Sioux nation having concentrated there for the purpose of war. The chief's sisters brought Veni a horse saddled and told Veni to mount and accompany the already moving column, that seems to be spreading far over the hills to the north. Late in the afternoon, they arrived at the ground of the encampment and rested for further orders from the warriors, who had gone to battle and would join them later. Veni had no means of informing herself at that time with whom the war was raging, but afterwards learned that General Sully's army was pursuing the Sioux, and that the engagement was with his men. Within 3 days, the Indian warriors returned to camp, and entered on a course of feasting and rejoicing. This caused Veni to believe that they had suffered very little loss in the battle. And soon again, they were making preparations for another battle. Only this time, the action seemed to draw ominously near the encampment. There seemed to be great commotion and great anxiety in the movements of the Indians, and presently, Venny could hear the sound of battle. And the echoes that came back to her from the reports of the guns in the distant hills warned her of the near approach of her own people, and her heart became a prey to wildly conflicting emotions, as the Indians hurried on in great desperation, and even forbid Venny turning her head and looking in the direction of the battle. Once she broke the rule and was severely punished for it, they kept their eyes upon Venny and were very cross and unkind. Hoping for rescue, yet fearing for its accomplishment, she passed the day. The smoke of action now rose over the hills beyond. The Indians now realized their danger and hurried on in great consternation. General Sully's soldiers appeared in close proximity, and Venny could see them charging on the Indians, who, according to their habits of warfare, skulked behind trees, sending their bullets and arrows vigorously forward into the enemy's ranks. Venny was kept in advance of the moving column of women and children, who were hurrying on, crying and famishing for water, trying to keep out of the line of firing. They had traveled far and fast all day long, without stopping, through clouds of smoke and dust, parched by a scorching sun. Venny's face was blistered from the burning rays, as she had been compelled to go with her head uncovered, after the fashion of all Indian women. The terrible scarcity of water and grass urged them forward, and General Sully's army in the rear gave them no rest. The following day or two they were driven so far ahead, and became so imminently imperiled by the pursuing forces, that they were obliged to leave all their earthly effects behind them, and swim the Yellowstone River for life. By this time, the ponies were completely famished, for want of food and water, so jaded that it was with great difficulty and hard blows that they could urge them on at all. When Indians are pursued closely, they manifest a desperate and reckless desire to save themselves, without regard to property or provisions. They throw away everything that will slow their escape, and all natural instinct seems lost in fear. The Indians had left in their compulsory haste immense quantities of plunder. They left even lodges standing, which proved immediate help, but in the end a terrible loss. One day was consumed in collecting and burning the Indian lodges, blankets and provisions, and that day was used advantageously by the Indians in getting beyond his reach. They travel constantly in time of war, ranging over vast tracts of country and prosecuting their battles or skirmishes with a quiet determination unknown to the whites. A few days' pursuit after Indians is generally enough to tire out the eagerness of the white men, as it is almost impossible to pursue the Indians through their own country with wagons and supplies for the army, and it is very difficult for American horses to traverse the barren rugged mountain passes, the Indians having every advantage in their own country and using their own mode of warfare. After the attack of General Sully was over, an Indian came to Venny with a letter to read, which he had taken from a soldier who was killed by him, and the letter had been found in his pocket. The letter stated that the topographical engineer was killed, and that General Sully's men had caught the Indians and cut their heads off, and stuck them up on poles. The soldier had written a friendly and kind letter to his people, but before it was mailed, he was numbered with the dead. As soon as the Indians were safe, and General Sully pursued them no longer, Venny lost all hopes for liberty. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell to be notified about our latest videos.